Good morning. Good morning. Today is January 26th, 2025. Let's begin by setting our intentions and making aspirations. As we say, the four immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. Those of you who are joining for the first time, hello, welcome. I'm going to read something from an Instagram page that I find great quotes on very often. It's called Pema Lotus, Pemalotus. And it's great quotes from great masters and teachers, Tibetan Buddhism, mostly Tibetan Buddhism. And it's run by our friend Shamel. A monk once said, "Imagine being bitten by a snake, and instead of focusing on healing from the poison, you chase the snake to understand why it bit you and to prove that you didn't deserve it." This teaching is akin to the parable of the poisoned arrow, found in the, I don't know how to pronounce this, Kulamalunkhya Sutra in the Pali Canon. The Pali Canon is the actual teachings of the Buddha himself. Here is a summary of the story. Malunkyaputta, a monk, approaches the Buddha and expresses dissatisfaction with his spiritual practice. He declares that unless the Buddha answers certain metaphysical questions, such as whether the universe is eternal or not, whether the soul and body are the same or different, what happens to someone after death, unless he answers these questions, he will abandon the spiritual path. The Buddha responded with this following parable. Suppose a man is struck by a poisoned arrow. His friends and family bring a surgeon to remove it, but the man refuses treatment until he knows who shot the arrow, whether they were a knowable person, a merchant, or a laborer. He insists on knowing the name of the shooter, what kind of bow was used, and the type of wood and feathers used for the arrow. Meanwhile, the man would die before any of these questions are answered. The Buddha then explains that similarly, questions about metaphysical matters are irrelevant to the goal of liberation. Very important point right there. The Buddha explained that questions about metaphysical matters are irrelevant to the goal of liberation. The goal of liberation is, what the path of Buddhism is all about, basically. What matters is addressing the immediate cause of suffering, in this example, the poisoned arrow, and practicing the path of freedom. He emphasizes focusing on the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path as the practical means to liberation. This parable highlights the Buddha's pragmatic approach, directing attention away from speculative philosophy towards the practical work of overcoming suffering. He's basically saying, it's in our hands. By figuring out how the universe works is not necessarily going to bring us any liberation, any relief from suffering. In the First Noble Truth, Buddha says, in life there is suffering. And the reason for suffering is clinging to the concept of inherently existing self, not knowing the truth, the nature of reality, and how we exist. And that there's a path out of suffering, and that path is where the path is described as the Eightfold Path, which incorporates right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right concentration, right livelihood, right effort, and right meditation. There are many teachings, on all those aspects of the Eightfold Path. But basically what's being said is that only you can liberate yourself by finding out, where, how things work and how you've been wronged and how this, who's to blame for this or what I can expect here. It's all an inside job, if you will. That only, the Buddha also said, you are your own master. Very important, it's not saying, he didn't say, I'm your master, and if you listen to me, you will be liberated. He said, you are your own master. Basically, like he's the doctor, and he's prescribing medicine, which is the path. But it's up to you to take the medicine. You can sit all you want and blame, well, I got this disease from so-and-so. Why did this person give me this disease? Why didn't this person know that they were contagious when I was there? And all the while you're figuring this out, you're not taking the medicine, when in fact the only cure is taking the medicine. Thank you to our friend Shamel and the Pamalotus Instagram page for sharing this today, because I think it's a really the Four Noble Truths is the first teaching of the Buddha. So, the beginning of all this, all these vast teachings, and this lineage of great masters and, and great lineages, this history of great lineages and great masters, it all began with this, that core instruction. And I think it's a good thing to keep in mind. With that, Victoria is going to speak a bit about meditation, and then we'll actually sit and practice for a bit.
The quote that Michael just read, Buddha saying, Buddha is basically saying distractions, when we're distracted, when we don't really address the source, but we are taken away out of awareness by distractions. And distractions can be pleasant or unpleasant. We could be distracted by chasing after pleasant things, or we could be very addicted to afflictive emotions. Needless to say, if we take them as actual real things in themselves, rather than having a source internally originating from us, we can really never implement any kind of change. And today I just wanted to speak a little bit to the practice itself, because I think a lot of us still struggle when we sit to practice. We don't understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it's very, very important to have a clear view so that our practice has some fruition. We have to understand the space of awareness. We have to understand what we have to clear that space of awareness from. And in Vajrayana Buddhism, that Michael and I practice with Garchen Rinpoche, our root Lama, all of the Tibetans pretty much practice Vajrayana. The mind, ordinary mind, which is called the impure mind, is taken as the path itself. So when we sit to meditation, we are working with that impure mind. Why is it called impure? Because the impurity is when the mind is caught up in this ordinary expression of, when the mind is not aware of the 8 consciousnesses. And we spoke about it for many times. We just reviewed it recently. The 5 senses and the 6 mental consciousness, the 7th ego and the 5 afflictions. That's afflicted consciousness number 7. And the 8th consciousness is the storehouse consciousness, where the imprints of previous actions and mental attitudes are kind of stored. And each time that something arises for us in our life, what happens is this infusion and a cognitive fusion, where we identify with the object, or we produce this whole, the junction of the 8 consciousnesses together with its triggers from the seed store consciousness, the emotions that surround the ego, and the sensory information and the six consciousness that process it. Usually we are caught up in the movie theater of life. That's what's called the unvirtuous mind. Unvirtuous mind, ordinary mind, does not know that everything we see, everything we are in sense of self-reflection, not mind's nature, but our cobbled together identity, is a product of the eight consciousnesses, and especially very, very contaminated by the seventh ego consciousness with its afflictive emotions. The ego is always surrounded by the five afflictions. When we're angry at someone and we look internally into that space, often we will find, why are we angry at that person? They call that mirror-like wisdom. If we look at anger simply as energy that's taking place in ourselves and not get caught up in the story, when we're not suffused into the object and taken out of our awareness, we will find that in that place the ego has all these kinds of narratives going on. I am right, he is wrong. I know, and he doesn't. He's my enemy because he's so. But underneath, if we all dig deeper, there's always something where the ego feels like it's not enough. Suffering arises in conjunction of how our ego and the five afflictive emotions, which always accompany the object of perception, in fact, they form the object of perception to a great extent. There's like the raw materials possibly, but the final product is me putting on these black glasses, or these glasses are the anger glasses. These glasses are the jealousy glasses. These are like the addiction desire glasses, etc. So the object, when we're not childish, we're not just ordinary mind people who believe in the objectivity and reality of the object out there. He is the enemy. That is true. I know it to be so. When we start to practice, our awareness shifts from I know he is wrong, and I know I am right, and he is bad and I am good. That childish awareness, the beginner practitioner awareness, shifts from outside to believing in the reality or truthfulness of the objects outside, to watching consciousness, and already knowing and suspecting and knowing that our consciousness determines completely how we perceive things. At the same time, the Four Noble Truths, it also tells us that all the suffering actually arises of this, believing in the self and the afflictive emotions that come with that belief in the self. So we take the ordinary afflicted mind as an object of meditation, because where would we be correcting and eradicating suffering if not in this internal space of awareness? We enter meditation with the view of our Buddha nature, and we immediately sit down to start to distinguish little by little. We start, of course, always with shamatha meditation of quelling and bringing down the storm clouds of this, eight consciousness ordinary mind. Because when we sit down to meditation, what we want to do is to distinguish between the calm space of awareness and the gross movement of the mind. All this tumultuous activity, the ocean and the waves. When we start to see the difference between them, so that means also that we're not engaging in the, we're just watching the movement. We're not engaging in the content, okay? We're just watching the energy as it arises and incorporates and ideas, emotions, memories. It's the analogy is given like a snow globe when it's shaken, but we want everything to settle and really get to that base awareness, the clarity. The more we can settle our awareness, the more we can cultivate clarity without settling and really first distinguishing the movement and the stillness, because the movement only takes place within the stillness quality of luminosity, because mind's nature is not emptiness, how we think of something is just not there. Mind's nature, that stillness, is also cognitive brightness. It's that which is present all the time. I mean, there is no time when there is no awareness. And thoughts are like these little pop-ups, the little flakes in the snow globe. So we sit to meditation already knowing that this is where we want to still enough to get to that space where we can spend more time in the cognitive clarity and stillness and be less on the side of these popping up things. It doesn't mean that we become, that we're in torpor or we're suppressing or, no, we let things arise, but we watch them now without fusing together with them. We watch them. It's a good analogy is I am in a movie theater and I'm watching the movement, the gross energy of movement of my mind as a movie, but I'm not identifying with the movie. Whereas an ordinary mind, the ordinary person's mind, is identifying with the movie and saying, I am this movie, this is me, I am doing this, and I am doing that, and I am killing that guy, and I'm hating that guy, and etc., So it's sitting down to experience mind's nature through its stillness and luminous quality. There will be no luminous quality until the stillness becomes profound enough. And Kalu Rinpoche, Nick is going to post a really beautiful teaching by Kalu Rinpoche who talks about how to implement that. And actually, we've been doing it always and all along with Michael's guiding us in the breath meditation. Kalu Rinpoche in that teaching says that when we reduce the fixation, meaning I am, these are my, this is like this, I see it like that. When we reduce the fixation on the self and don't identify with our afflictions, rather we identify with the luminous spaciousness of the mind, just the bare awareness, we can be the person sitting in the movie theater, not ducking and not screaming and not going through every little turbulence that's happening in the movie theater. So the Buddha strongly emphasized the simple practice of mindfulness, of breathing. It is a profound practice for settling the subtle body. The subtle body. Subtle body means energetic body. We settle our energies. We bring them into our awareness of the heart center and through the entire body. In its natural state, the subtle body settling in its natural state. It is closely related to settling the mind in its natural state. When we can learn how to settle the body, we're also helping to settle the mind. This is just like step number 1. We took our shoes off before we entered the temple. In the practice of settling the mind through the process of bringing full, clear awareness, single-pointedly to the space of the mind, the space of the mind, the infinite calm, clarity, like the bare cognizant quality of the mind. That's where we want to be, okay? We're not suppressing thoughts, movement is happening, but at the same time, we're connecting to the stillness and lucid, when we say emptiness in Buddhism, we mean that there are no objects. Even I'm not there as I am as Victoria. This is the state of mind where I can't say it's my mind. There's no need to label it. There's no need to say it. We want to watch the movement in the space and connect to the space of bare awareness. And that is actually when we release the control, and it's very, very necessary to release the control. the mind can settle and heal itself. And then from that, we can start to experience what our mind is really like, not just this, turmoil and activity of our afflictions. This occurs simply by being gently aware of whatever arises. This is how we do it. Without grasping to aversion or desire, and without identifying with thoughts. We observe the sensations associated with the fluctuations of energy. So a thought arises, I am angry at that man. We go kind of from he's an asshole, he's my enemy, to saying I have anger, I'm observing anger in my mind. And we look very, very clearly. We're not engaged with the content. We're looking just at the energy of anger. And by simply looking, that anger will arise and it will subside. And the more we practice that, the more we can settle our mind. We can bring that into our daily, ordinary kind of engagements with life and still stay in the state of meditation. So this practice on the breath is incredibly, incredibly profound. Please think of it on its really ultimate kind of level, what it really gives us, what it really does. There are three qualities to be cultivated within that state of shamatha. First is relaxation, which cannot be overemphasized in the modern world. In worlds like Tibet and India, people knew relaxation. They could let go of the content of the movie and just serenely sit in the movie theater, mind turned inward, not distracted, whether distracted with pleasantries or unpleasantries, but mind turned inward, aware of its nature. Seeing the movement arise, but being really on the side of the stillness and clarity element. Second quality that we want to cultivate in our meditation is on the basis of deep relaxation, meaning letting go the control. When we control, we're in the sphere of the ego. We will not really know what's happening. We'll be in the movie, ducking and screaming and crying. We have to relinquish control. Relaxation is that relinquishing control, meaning we're not suppressing anything, but we find ourselves in the mind turned inward, not being swept away by these fluffy things on the surface. On the basis of that, we cultivate stability. That means we develop continuity of attention on the ground, on the luminous, bare, luminous quality of the mind. And with that stable foundation, if we can have our attention be turned inward to really kind of the base level of our mind, with that foundation, we can enhance vividness. In other words, if an ordinary mind is like a cup of water with a sediment on the bottom that's always stirred, vividness is when we give the time, we relax, we sustain attention, we wait, we have patience, we have diligence. This is what meditation practice is. We let everything settle, and then we can just connect to that layer of the mind. So when Michael starts to do our meditation right now, and please remember, the primary object of mindfulness is the space of the mind, the space of the mind. And whatever thoughts, images, and other mental events arise within the space, we don't connect with that other than we know its movement. It's like when we meditate on sound, often, for more developed practitioners that have stability, even conversation of others can be used as a technique, because we're not thinking about what they're saying. We use the sound to see its empty quality. We just watch it, something happening and dissolving at the same time, like coming together, dissolving, coming together, dissolving. That's why we meditate so much on impermanence, because impermanence is kind of like seeing things as they are. coming together, dissolving, coming together, dissolving. It's not a, impermanence is not a thing of loss, or, somebody's going to take my toy away, I'm going to lose my beautiful, shiny new car. Impermanence is how things really are. At the same time, impermanence is also very encouraging because it tells us that we can go from stupid to enlightenment. So it's a very, very, it's a quality, it's a thought that gives us a lot of courage. Facing things as they are takes a lot of courage and a lot of mind. So we think on impermanence tremendously a lot. And just remember that when we're like swept away into very, very difficult emotions, remember the quality of impermanence. If we give it the right space, if we really connect to like that luminous, quiet, under the surface of the ocean, mind's space, they will subside, and that's the only place where we can actually implement any kind of changes. You don't want to live in anger, because often, look at our lives. I mean, often the event that made us angry and made us anguish has already long time passed away, yet we're still finding ourselves in that place, always thinking, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, that person hurt me like this, but I didn't say that, etc., etc., etc. All we're doing is like letting the ego sweep us away, with our regret, with our, guilt, with our depression, with all these kinds of things, at the center of it all is like, I should have done this, I should have been, as practitioners, we drop all that crap because this is all just like stirring the sediment on the bottom of the cup. We want to get to the stability of being able to settle our emotions. And then when we can bring that stability of really identifying with, with that just clarity, with the cup where everything is settled, we can make the decisions, we can make the changes, and we will always, once we experience a little taste of freedom, when the mind settles. Freedom is really when the mind is free of afflictive emotions, when the mind is settled, when the mind is not grasping, when the mind is not angry, when the mind is not jealous, when the mind is not in craving or hatred. The mind is happy. And that's the virtuous mind. And acting out of virtuous mind, there's a very, very simple answer to that. It's like we don't need to read tons and tons of books. Virtuous mind is mind of compassion. So on virtuous mind, you will always find the root is the ego and the afflictive emotions eating at us, cannibalizing our mind, not allowing for any clarity to emerge. It's like this constant churning, and please don't find yourself 20 years later regretting and the guilt and the anger still at the person who may have passed away and the situation so long done. I'm not saying there's no space for important events in our life, but our understanding of these events has to change and progress and has to become a thing of where we liberate little by little. We become more free from the weight of our attachments of the afflictive emotions, because ultimately it's not like we don't understand when a person is doing bad things, but if we can act out of clarity, we can really truly act as opposed to react, which is like a loss of anything. So that's what we do in meditation. We cultivate meditation to cultivate that space of freedom.
Going back to the Eightfold Path, I said right meditation. Usually it's translated right mindfulness. It's pretty much the same thing, but just maybe it's good to think of both of those things at the same time. And also, before we meditate, this class started as a completely secular, though I don't really like that word, talking about Buddhism, but there was no discussion of Buddha Dharma or anything. It was just strictly, calm abiding meditation practice. And then at your request, because of your questions about Dharma, questions about karma and things like that, we asked our teacher if we should discuss some of these things or answer some of these questions if we could. And he said, yes, but always keep the focus on mind. Because Buddha is not the name of a person, it's the name of mind. which basically is what Buddhism is. It's really a science of the mind. It's to me, there's really no religiosity. I mean, in anything she just said, it's not really. I don't see it as a religion, to be honest. I think it's kind of one of the unfortunate things is that it is perceived that way because often, you know, especially more learned and intellectual people kind of see religion as a more of a superstition and less valid than scientific fact. When the truth is something like Buddhism and the way it works with the mind is often has a wisdom that far surpasses science, things like that. So keep that in mind. Those of you who are a little bit put off by the idea of religion, I don't, as a practitioner for a long time, don't really see it as that.
May I add,
Yes,
please?
please.
At the time of the Buddha, of historical Buddha Shakyamuni, Buddha was, of course, a prince, and growing up in India in a caste system, and there were lots and lots of religions, besides even Hinduism and things like that. He never emphasized proselytizing and conversion. In fact, it's a very not at all a thing that's ever really talked about in Buddhism. Buddha wanted to bring. You don't have to be a Buddhist to practice the study of the mind and virtuous and unvirtuous states of mind. Unvirtuous states of mind being those overcome by affliction, at the center of which is always the ego. I am not enough. I want to. I want that. I want more. And virtuous states of mind which are turned toward others. Transcending and overcoming the afflicted mind, which is what a virtuous mind is. And it really, I just wanted to say that Buddha was not in the work of conversion. Buddha was in the work of bringing us the methods and the means, how to purify ourselves, which is the same as liberate ourselves, how to ripen ourselves and to bring ourselves to virtuous states of mind. Which by the way are also like a synonym for happiness, because in only virtuous states of mind can give us happiness. Happiness is not pleasure. It's not like buying and acquiring another thing, being subject to advertising and what my neighbor thinks of me when I have a big car and I have the big, those are all afflictive mental states. Happiness is something completely different, and it's not conditioned by anything. It arises out of clarity and an understanding that is, it's in a way more social and connected than we've ever been. At the same time, it's not really conditioned by values.
Okay, so we'll do a brief review. I think, Nick, the most detailed review would be the January 12th, the first, which was, I believe, the first class of this year. Our classes are archived on YouTube under Meditation with Michael Imperioli. Nick also, if you go into the chat function, shared a link to the Kalu Rinpoche teaching that Victoria mentioned. So if you go to the chat, you'll see a link and you can copy that link and watch it when we're done. So the first thing you do is take your position. You take your seat. We sit, most of us cross-legged on the floor. If you do sit cross-legged, some of you might be able to do a half lotus or full lotus based on your flexibility. Not necessary. You could just be simple cross-legged based on your own comfort level. Usually a pillow helps. Not too high, not too low, to kind of get your hips either in line or above your knees. That takes some of the strain off your lower back for some of us, especially for those of us who are a little bit older, like me. The back should be straight but not rigid. So relaxed, a relaxed uprightness. Just enough tension to remain upright. And those of you who come often are probably tired of hearing this analogy, but the guitar string is a good example. Too tight, no tone. Too slack, no tone. Just enough tension, and you get a lovely tone. Same thing with our posture here in meditation. And kind of in our relationship to the body in meditation, not too slack, not too tight, just enough, just enough uprightness to make things aligned and allow the, energy to flow unimpededly through the energetic channels of the body. The head is slightly tilted, kind of following the angle of the bridge of the nose a bit. And the hands, some of us do this. So your left hand is open, right hand goes on top of it, touching thumbs and resting in the lap, or just down, palms down on your knees, resting. Again, relaxed, the head is tilted. In this class, we do lips closed, teeth slightly apart, tongue resting where the roof of the mouth meet the upper teeth. Breathing through the nose. If you're not capable, if you're congested or whatever, have issues, breathe through the mouth. Same thing with the jaw regarding the tension. Not tight if the mouth is closed, not stuck. Just enough to keep that pose. Breathing through the nose. Now the eyes. In this class we practice with our eyes open. Many of you, if you're here for the first time and have meditated before, you've meditated with eyes closed, and some, use that technique and approach. We try to do it with the eyes open. For the simple reason that we want to eventually work this practice into daily life, much of which is lived with eyes open, So the meditation is not just kind of in this closed environment of the head, and then, when you have that external visual stimuli, everything's too intense. This is good practice, being aware of the surroundings, because we're working with mindfulness and awareness. So the eyes are open, not wide open, not kind of sleepy. In terms of focus, not intensely focused, not kind of, intentionally out of focus. Just rest your gaze on whatever's in front of you. That could be something you set intentionally, like a flower or a picture of the Buddha or a view out the window, or it can just be whatever happens to be in front of you, like the cushion on the sofa, in front of me. And the gaze just rests gently on whatever's in front of it. It will help not to have something that's going to create its own story, right? Like if, it's a vase that, your a relative who passed away recently gave to you or left to you, and that's going to take you into the story of, that situation. Or if you're looking at a busy street view or something, and that's going to constantly kind of take you into the story of what's happening on the street, then that's probably not the best place to be focusing your gaze. Something that's going to allow your gaze to rest, and in turn your mind to rest. So again, sitting cross-legged, back is straight, shoulders not back like a soldier, just resting, the hands relaxed in whatever pose you choose, head slightly tilted, mouth closed, teeth apart. Breathing through the nose. And let's just take 3 breaths. And in terms of breath, we're not doing deep breaths, we're not doing shallow breaths, natural breaths. We'll do 3 breaths, inhalations and exhalations, and focus your attention where the breath is moving. If you're breathing through the nose, that's where the kind of nostrils meet the upper lip. If you're breathing through the mouth, that's the lips, I guess. So 3 breaths, just focusing your attention on the place where the breath is moving in and out. Okay. That is the basic physical kind of mechanical technique of what we're going to do. Now comes the working with the mind part. So this is the body and the breath that you're focusing on. You're focusing on where the breath is moving. And now we're going to sit for like 10 minutes. And what's going to happen is, with your attention focused on your breath, you're going to think. Thoughts are going to arise because that's what the mind does. Meditation is not about not thinking, which is a misconception. It's about working with your mind, hence working with your thoughts as they arise, seeing them arise, watching them dissipate. We use really two techniques here on working with the thoughts. One is when you become aware of the fact that you're thinking, which is the key to the practice, really. Becoming aware that a thought has arisen. Once you notice that fact, you say to yourself, back to the breath, and focus your attention again. This will be repeated, this technique, over and over again. The other technique, again, really hinges on the fact of you becoming aware of the fact that you're thinking. You're not aware of what the thought, you don't have to, qualify the thought. It's a heavy thought, it's a light thought, it's a bad thought, a good thought. You shouldn't be thinking. It's all you're doing is labeling whatever arises as a thought. And you can use this kind of mind's eye visualization that the mind, the nature of your mind, is like sky. It's complete, it's infinite, it's clear, it's placid, it's calm, it's limitless, it's stainless, like a clear blue sky. And the thought, once you notice it, that has arisen, is like a cloud that arises from this, limitless blue clarity, this calm clarity. Sometimes it's a light wisp of a cloud, sometimes it's a storm cloud that's dark and heavy. But the thing that all these clouds have in common, all these thoughts have in common, is that they arise from the sky and they dissolve back into that same very sky without leaving a trace, without staining it, without defiling it, without damaging it. And we're left with that clear, calm, infinite blue clarity, which is the true nature of our mind, which is always there, no matter how obscured by our habitual patterns of thinking, behaviors, but is always there, and its nature is never damaged or, blemished or destroyed. Definitely, it is often obscured from us because we're focusing, our awareness is, caught up in so many different, like Victoria was talking about, stories about, blame and regret and worry and anxiety and hopes and things like that, rather than just settling into the moment, letting the thoughts dissolve. Almost as if like scooping a cup of water from a muddy river. When you settle that glass down on something still, the sediment settles to the bottom, leaving that clear water. All right, with this in mind, let's practice. Take your posture, relax, relax the body, relax the mind. Back to the breath. Notice your thinking, back to the breath. Focus again your attention, refocus. Again, The whole key to this is becoming aware that you have started thinking. That may take a while. You may be lost in the story, the chain of thought, the train of thought, back to the breath, or watch that thought dissolve like a cloud into the sky-like nature of your mind. Settle back into that calm. Back to the breath. If you're feeling a lot of tension and need to shift your body, do it and then settle again. Settle the body back into the pose, relax into it, back to the breath. If you feel you need to take a deep breath, do that as well. And then go back to the relaxed, easy breaths. I'm thinking. Watch the thought dissolve like a cloud into the sky-like nature of mind. If your mind feels particularly busy, you can try to lower the angle of your gaze slightly. In the same way, if your mind feels a little sluggish, you can raise the angle of your gaze a tiny bit. That may help. back to the breath. Become aware of the fact that a thought has arisen. Just let it go. Easily. Watch it dissolve like a cloud into that sky-like nature of your mind. Excellent. Thank you. You can use the Q&A button on your Zoom toolbar to ask any questions about practice or what we've been talking about.
I just also
Go ahead.
just wanted to add, when we have to habituate, we have to learn how to be together with our difficult states without identifying with them. When difficult emotions, those energies pass through us, we have to remember those are temporary moments, they're temporary stains. We don't have to identify with them. At the same time, we can let things be. It's much, much better when we allow things to arise without twisting them, suppressing them, being unable to tolerate. How can this thought arise in my mind? How can I be this angry person? How can I be this jealous person? We can only really hope for any change when we can live and allow the thought to be clear and to be there, the emotion to be clear and to be there, and then saying, this is a temporary stain, this is not my nature. So before we turn, we kind of have to turn our enemies into our friends. That's what it's about, the difficult energies. We have to work with them and, see them dissolve into the nature of the mind, because there is no movement without the basis, and the basis is, like Michael said, is unstainable, is unbreakable. It never ceases. It is always there. We just have to learn how to connect to it by, shifting the emphasis from our ego mind, our deluded dualistic mind, to this mind of a practitioner. And we do the meditation so that we can take this practice on the breath, other kinds of practices, bodhicitta practices, into difficult situations when we are going to be triggered and we are going to be challenged. I mean, this is what the practice is for, obviously.
Someone's asking, do you have to sit upright? Can you lie down? The problem with lying down is you can fall asleep. So this kind of quality of awareness, mindfulness, there's a kind of an alertness that's connected to that. There's which lying flat on the back could dull a little bit, because it's that's the position we use for sleeping, unconsciousness almost. But so there are people that have physical limitations that's the only way they can practice. But if that's the case, of course. But if that's not the case, then you should be sitting, really.
The emphasis of the body position, and it's not about sitting on the floor, it's having the straight spine. This is our wisdom channel at the center of our body, so that the energies flow unimpededly. We're watching the subtle energy and the movements. We're settling, we keep coming back on the breath to stay focused on this internal state and not let it be disrupted, not have our consciousness be carried out of our gazing.
How does Buddhist practice incorporate the felt sensations that we experience all the time and are often left out of awareness? I'm used to attending to my body sensations as I try to settle my mind, not referring to using the breath as focus, just whatever is there. I find sadness or other emotions in my body. How does this hope this makes sense.
I mean, it's a very modern kind of a thing to distinguish and separate the body and mind. Awareness flows through everything. That's why we will feel awareness in, you know, not just in our brain center, obviously. Most likely, it's not going to be in our brain center. We will feel it with everything. What we're trying to do in meditation is to have that movement, which is sadness, but sadness as a result of mental movement, of characterizing certain things in such a way. Loss, I didn't get this, that person said something to me that made me feel not 100%, et cetera, et cetera. What we're trying to do in meditation is to watch the movement while connecting to the subtle level of the mind, which is just bare awareness, watching sensations like movies without connecting to them. Needless to say, they're my sensations. The reason why we connect to this stillness and clarity of the mind is so that these sensations do not dull us and cover up our mind with this continuous fluctuations of, gross movement, mental activity. It's gross mind, gross energy. Why it is because it's not connected with awareness, with the light, to our subtle mind, to the basis of the mind. It's okay to feel, the sadness, but at the same time, instead of like just analyzing endlessly analyzing, because analyzing often does not free us. It just transforms things into kind of other objects, into other clusters of thinking. Often it has zero effect in terms of releasing us from that space. What we're doing with meditation is we're observing the difficulty, sadness, anger, this, that, and we're letting it go, because actually an awareness arises in us. The sadness or the difficulty arises with our ego mind and how the ego processes the information. Okay? In meditation practice, we do not identify with the ego. We identify more on the side of our awareness. We have both. We have both. We have this, impure mind, the unvirtuous mind, because the unvirtuous mind is always looking at oneself. How do I feel? Who made me feel sad? Who took away from me? And I'm not discounting like really big moments of loss, of real tragedy, of real trauma, but we train so that when that trauma comes, and specifically for Buddhists, for yogis, it's about the moment of death, when we are experiencing the most difficult circumstances of our entire life. Our senses are folding in, the elements are, dissolving into each other. Our mind goes to a very difficult place. We practice so that when these difficult, big moments arise, we know how to be with them and not be crushed and not be swept away. We learn how to stand, how to place ourselves in face of these difficulties, especially that moment, the very, very big finale. In each moment in our life, it's like one word, one little movement, somebody said, can sweep us away to the wrong direction, or, keep us in the right place, and that's what we do in meditation. We're not suppressing, we're not anything, but we are acknowledging that our feeling a certain sensation, pain, guilt, this or that, is not all that there is. That's just our ordinary mind. That's gross movement of the mind. In that space, we are trying to find just this bare, cognizant, luminous quality. It's like when we wake up in the morning after being blanked out, that cognizant quality is there. That cognizant quality is always there, and that's what we are trying to learn how to identify with in meditation. It's like shelter in hurricane, you know?
There's a couple of questions that are several people ask. A good beginner book, Nick, if you want to put this in the chat, is The Power of Mind by Khentrul Lodro Taye Rinpoche. That's a beginner's book that it's also not just for beginners, for people who have a lot of experience. It's very helpful too. The Power of Mind, Khentrul Lodro Taye Rinpoche. Nick's going to put that in the chat box. If you go to Solidago Productions, the website where you signed in for this class, there's a list of teachers. So if any of this, the Buddhism components that we're speaking of, if that has interest, we always encourage you to look into authentic teachers from authentic lineages. We're students talking about, what we've heard from our teachers. We're not teachers. So if you want, we can give you meditation instruction, but basically we're just sharing things that we've learned. But the best way to really incorporate and these teachings is to work, to find an authentic teacher from an authentic lineage. We have some suggestions on the Solidago Productions website. The other question that's very common is how long. The best thing you can do is to meditate, make it into a daily practice. Once a day, twice a day. Once a day is fine. Some people like the morning, some people like at night, some people do in the afternoon. Once a day, if you set a place with a cushion and, a little corner of your house, or it might help that it's the same place all the time. It doesn't have to be, though. We suggest beginning with short sessions, kind of like what we did today, 10 minutes. Could be less, could be a little more. But the regular practice and making it a daily thing, making it regular is really essential for any kind of
Yes.
real progress.
And nothing can substitute the real practice, the experience, the empirical component of it. It's like if we were preparing to run, a long race, a marathon. No amount of books is going to help us unless we take these books and use them as a basis for our sitting, for our practice. We have to do it experientially. There is no substitute for taking the medicine to become healthy again. There is no substitute for training. Books are things that give us the view. And then what do we take into the meditation? We take the view. We're not just spacing out. We're not just making ourselves feel relaxed, blah, blah, all these kinds of, things that have arisen, that pollute a lot of our environment in terms of what is meditation. It's not the same thing we do in a yoga studio. No, not to diminish anything about yoga. I'm just saying meditation cannot be substituted by anything else. And of course, it helps to learn to take the view into meditation, to really kind of learn how we and all sentient beings have Buddha nature. So when we're standing in front of a difficult person, we remind ourselves that person too is not just my enemy. That person has Buddha nature. He has a temporary, mental condition which doesn't allow him to really bring that to the surface, but rather be more like an animal or a hungry ghost or a this and a that. But that being has Buddha nature. I have Buddha nature. I have the strength to withstand this right now by reminding myself that person does have Buddha nature. But there is no substitute for practice. Only practice can teach us how to actually bring the fire down and extinguish it when we are in the middle of it. When our ego becomes inflamed by the tiniest of words or looks or, brushes, nothing can give us that relief except that we have practiced, meditation.
How does the meditation you've shown and discussed today differ from transcendental meditation? I know nothing about transcendental meditation, but I will say the meditation that we're practicing here, to me, does not exist on its own as a separate thing from Dharma teachings, from the teachings of Buddha. That it's an essential part of the path, but not removed from the path and not something separate. Is it feasible to enable empathy and compassionate action in the context and general upset we may be experiencing these days? Someone else asked something very similar about how can I be in a state of letting go and not be angry at what's going on in the world today? Some of us are meant to put our lives on the line, sacrifice. Is it possible to do that mindfully? And also, how to transform relative perception as an auspicious opportunity to feel interconnectivity and activate beneficial activity. Number one is, because we spoke about the Four Noble Truths, and the first one being, we saw the second Noble Truth being the reason we suffer is that we basically have a diluted perception of our existence. We see ourselves as this independently, inherently existing self. So if we have a diluted perception, how do we act? How do we, kind of discern things in a non-diluted way? And that's by following the teachings and following a teacher, and learning about compassionate activity through the teachings and through a teacher. Because, often compassion becomes, there's a biased element. We have compassion for people we pity, feel sorry for. Maybe it's harder for us to feel compassion for a billionaire or for the president or, the president of this country or something like that, because we feel they should behave in a certain way, and I'm not going to have compassion for that person. But this person who's homeless on the street, I have compassion for because, and that's a very relative, and a biased and bodhicitta, which is the loving, radiance of the compassionate heart, is without bias. It's just this radiance of understanding the nature of existence, that we're, interdependence, interconnectivity, and all those things. But I think all these questions really, the thing about Buddhism, which separates it from like philosophy, is that there's a path. It's not just ideas to agree with or disagree with, or say this makes sense or it doesn't make sense. Because you can agree and disagree and it makes sense and everything, but then the book is over and tomorrow, what are you going to do? There hasn't been change, there hasn't been transformation, there hasn't been realization or anything like that, because there's not really a path. In Tibetan Buddhism, the path is the teacher in a way, and the teacher is the path in a sense. So we can't stress enough the value of connecting with an authentic teacher from an authentic lineage. This wisdom tradition, which is ancient, is alive and accessible and real and available, and there are living, beings transmitting this wisdom. And for us to just rely on ourselves to figure it out is really missing a tremendous opportunity, and probably, really kind of closing the door on the possibility of this path.
May I also
Yes,
add?
please.
So, in Buddhism, in Vajrayana Buddhism, actually this comes from the second turning of the wheel by the Buddha, Mahayana, is the two truths, always seeing everything on a relative and an absolute level. We are a part of what's happening anywhere at any given time. We are also part and parcel of the because we have individual karma and we have group karma. We are human beings, for example. We are not flocks of birds. We're not animals living under the ground. Imagine the kind of suffering they go through all the time, and they're sentient beings just like us. But we start with understanding what there is, and we're a part of it. That's just karma, cause and effect. We're a part of what's happening. And then the emphasis, then there is, of course, the absolute view. We're not going to get into it. But as a part of the karmic relative view, we we have to ask ourselves, if I'm a drop in this ocean, we're not observing other beings' space. We're not telling them what to do. We're not saying I am right and I know what to do and you're wrong because you're such a bad person. We're always watching our own mind. This is what practice is. So if I am a drop of this ocean of humanity, of the one of the six realms, the human realm, what do I do? How do I act? Isn't this the relative level question? We have to watch that we are virtuous, that our mind is not there to point fingers and to get enraged and be lost in all these afflictive emotions. We can experience the loss, we can experience the sadness, but what we have to make sure is that whatever goes through our three doors is virtuous. In other words, no matter how bad it is, let me be the right kind of, let me be the mind that turns toward others instead of just engaging and indulging in the judgment and the pointing and the things. We are all going through a difficult time, let's say, currently in our country, but it's very important for us not to get lost in distractions, in the judgments, pleasant or unpleasant. Make sure that we're not carried away by like addictions to negative behaviors, because if we are engaged in continuously watching crappy news and being re-triggered day and night between the us and them, well, there is no us and them on an ultimate level. And so it's up to each one of us as practitioners to make sure that whatever goes through our three doors, it doesn't mean we don't see what's happening. It just means that what the output that we have is not conditioned by the baby mind, not conditioned by the ego afflictive emotions. It's conditioned by always being in the right place. This, always having the right ground from which activity of body, speech, and mind is unleashed. And let's make sure that that activity is virtuous. Let's make sure that selfishness is not at the basis of everything we do. Let's not call compassion pity or other kinds of derogatory kinds of things. Compassion is not, I like, this group, but that nation, let them burn, and etc., etc., etc. We must connect on a deeper level as practitioners, and we are responsible not at pointing. That's what children do in kindergarten. As practitioners, we're always looking internally to our mind and what we do, and we make sure that we turn away from selfish activity, woe is me, all that kind of me stuff, to the space of all of us, to the space of others. And really, on an ultimate level, Garchen Rinpoche says it all the time. It's just like a phrase that always comes from his lips. There is no self and other. That's delusion. That's dualistic conceptual mind. So we habituate to breaking that delusion little by little by little, and that delusion is not going to be broken until the vessel remains with its five senses, sensory fields, and the five sense objects. There's the body has its limitations it sets on us, but we remind ourselves that even in that condition, in this temporary condition in which we are in samsara, and samsara is a state of mind. It's not a place. It's not like a bad hotel with horrible people in it. We remind ourselves that even out of this place, we can create positive activities of body, speech, and mind. That's it. So mind turned inward. Do not get distracted, and get like hooked on negativity and afflictions, how horrible everything is, how this and this everything is, how bad they are. That makes me so good because I understand it. All we can do and all we should do is, because this is the here and now that we have. This is what we look at. We think of impermanence. These conditions arise, they will also dissolve. We look at this like that so that our attachment to good and bad distractions, to negative and pleasant and painful distractions diminishes, and so that we have clarity in its place of distraction. And clarity will only start to emerge when the attachment decreases. Decrease attachment to me and my thoughts and my judgments and my I know this, he doesn't know that. Lessen these bonds, and little by little clarity will emerge, and your behaviors will be unconditioned by those bonds, by the difficulties. Think of like being a doctor who goes to a leper colony and delivers what must be delivered. Don't be prideful about it. Don't be conceited about it. Just do it. Just say, well, this is the virtuous path. I'm doing it because this is the right, causes and conditions for my activity. And that's it. Stay focused. Do not get off the path. I mean, the Buddhists, the beauty of that is that they give you practical maps how to guide oneself through all these. We have millions of self-help books, and I don't see a lot of them helping us, to stay focused and stay on the path. There are a lot of conventional means out there, and they do bring maybe some temporary relief. But if we don't have a very clear path, stay on the path of righteousness, very, very difficult. What is the path of righteousness? It's mind of bodhicitta, mind of compassion. It's not like some big academic answer, Very, very simple. It's the mind that turns away from me, mine, to the mind of all of us. So not difficult, and that's what we're watching in that space of awareness. Where is my mind? Is it all about me, how I'm suffering, how bad I have it? Or is it the mind that says, yeah, it's a difficult situation, but I'm not alone in the situation. And so my activity is going to be based on that clarity.
Someone's asking if there's a Buddhist center in Atlanta. There happens to be one that I've been to that's really great. It's called Drepung Losling. Drepung Losling. It's on Dresden Drive in Ashford Park. Just Google Buddhist Center, Dresden Drive, Atlanta, and you'll find it. It's really good. I recommend that. We will close by saying our dedication. So we dedicate whatever merit generated from today's practice to the benefit of all beings. All beings.
All beings.
By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And thanks to our producer,
thank you everyone
Nick Solidio,
for coming here to practice. And
Yes.
Thank you, Nick, for
See you
being so
next time.
generous.
Thank you.